Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jasmine Beckstrand with Proposal Mastery. Today, our goal is to offer some clarity on the FAR, which can be a point of confusion for, even the most experienced of contractors at times. If there's one thing the government loves, it's regulation, and even if you aren't versed in their jargon, the FAR is a body of regulation you'll quickly need to learn to navigate. In other words, you can't really put this topic off for very long because the FAR applies, albeit in varying degrees, but it applies to every federal proposal, certainly. So we're going to make sure going forward that you understand how to use the FAR to ensure your proposals are compliant and competitively positioned. So let's jump right in. To kick us off here, I'm going to dive in and give you a brief definition or overview of what the FAR is, just so that we're all on the same page. And for some of you newer government contractors in particular, this may be, the first real instruction that you've had on the subject, so I don't want to skip its definition. To put it as simply and directly as I can, the FAR, or Federal Acquisition Regulations, are the rules that govern all federal procurement processes. As a result, when it comes to individual contract opportunities, the FAR dictates how an agency must evaluate proposal submissions and award the subsequent contract. Now, which specific regulations apply to a contract opportunity vary, depending on the nature of the contract, such as the scope of work, the contract type, but every federal proposal is bound by the FAR. As a consequence of that, your proposal, assuming it is compliant, is to a large extent a response to FAR-driven requirements. And that's kind of the relationship there. So, for example, the pricing rules that you must follow that are mandated by a solicitation, or certifications that you're required to submit in your proposal, they're all based on different regulations in the FAR. This, of course, means that compliance with the FAR is required to have an all-around compliant proposal that is eligible for selection and award. So if you fail to, appropriately follow the FAR guidelines and instructions, your proposals are kind of destined for not just contract loss, but immediate disqualification. And it's precisely for that reason that I always tell small business contractors, don't delay in learning how the FAR works. I know for so many new businesses in particular that they find the FAR kind of intimidating, but understanding its function and implications for proposals is not a step you want to skip. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that we're not skipping that step today, giving you the education that you need, to navigate the FAR in your proposal projects. And so next we're going to take a look at the body of regulations that most commonly shape your proposal specifically. The first thing I want to acknowledge, the FAR's influence on your proposal begins way before you ever put the digital pen to paper. I want to make that really clear. Because the FAR influences your prospective contract very early in its procurement and acquisition lifecycle, before the proposal phase really even hits. And then still, of course, once the agency does finally reach the proposal stage, the FAR outlines the procedures for every single step. So that's the processes for, issuing solicitations, including the specifics for how contracting officers must issue them to potential sources. Also broken down in the FAR is what information should be included in the solicitation package, including requirements for proposals. So in that use and application, it is largely the FAR that is determining what type of information your proposal needs to include to be compliant. And then, of course, we can also credit the FAR for requirements surrounding how offerers must submit their proposals for commercial products and services. And if you expected that the proposal submission would be where the FAR influence ends, you'd be mistaken. That's not the end of its influence on your proposal project, because even if you successfully manage to comply with the FAR instructions on how to, build your proposal, and then your offer is compliant, right, with those requirements that it's subject to, and if you follow through on meeting the requirements for how to submit the proposal, even if you get all of that done correctly, your offer is still subject to the mercy of the FAR with their guidelines pertaining to offer evaluation. It is the FAR that agencies refer to and rely on when determining how their evaluation criteria are to be determined and the strategies are to be carried out and executed and performed. So when looking at this broken down list here, you can see more directly how the FAR has great influence over many factors and details and really every component in your proposal project itself, from its inception, with its content and structure of proposal, all the way to submission and evaluation afterwards. So, the FAR influences here, we have pretty much everything, which again is why it's important to be prepared with this insight, because surely you can't give yourself the best shot at winning and the best competitive positioning possible by overlooking or downplaying the impact that the FAR has on your offers. Now, I don't think this discussion would be complete without at least citing what I'd say are the more common FAR parts and clauses that impact proposals. The FAR itself is broken down into parts and further segmented by individual clauses. That's the way it's designed. As far as parts go, the most impactful parts on proposals, in my experience, include parts 15, 12, and 19. Part 15 describes the procedures for both competitive and non-competitive open market acquisitions that exceed the simplified acquisition threshold. Part 12 outlines rules designed to streamline the process by which federal agencies purchase commercial items. This would include products and services that are sold to the general public, including off-the-shelf hardware, software, and support services. Then Part 19 outlines policies and procedures agencies use to promote contracting opportunities to small businesses and covers topics like set-asides and subcontracting. As far as the specific clauses go, it's especially common to encounter clauses from FAR Part 52. This is because Part 52 of the FAR lays out the standard solicitation provisions and contract clauses used in government contracts. So many of them are often applied. The idea is for these provisions and clauses to help promote a standardized procurement approach that promotes compliance, with applicable law. So it's meant to be all done in effort for streamlining. I've cited some more frequently applicable FAR clauses here as examples from, again, that FAR Part 52. So let's say you're managing a proposal project and start to encounter FAR clauses like these, right? The next question is, what do? You recognize the part numbers, you recognize the clauses, but how do you handle them? So let's transition to now reviewing some FAR best practices for your proposal projects themselves. Once you start to encounter them, this is what to do next. So when it comes to FAR clauses, the first thing I tell contractors is to make sure they always read the reference clause or clauses, usually plural. Read the reference clauses carefully. So often these reference clauses, they require specific statements or attachments be included in your proposal. And if you overlook those requirements, you risk receiving a non-compliant determination. I know many small businesses turn to chat AI systems to review FAR clauses, but I want to offer a little bit of caution with that approach. Remember, these reference clauses are intended to be incorporated, included, and fully applicable to the resulting contract. So you need to know what you're signing up for. So while a chat AI system, it may help you in knowing what elements to include in your proposal so the submission is compliant. And that's taking a very large assumption that you've executed all the proper prompts so that nothing is missed, that the AI captures everything. But even if those assumptions are correct, you've successfully done that, I think it's kind of a dangerous approach to for a business to submit an offer for a contract with which they haven't fully reviewed as far as the contract terms go. If you submit a proposal and you're telling the government you're prepared to sign on the dotted line when you're selected, it's my professional recommendation that you actually need to read through the cited clauses. It'll only be a matter of time before so many of them become second nature to you and it gets faster to review. But the last thing you want to do is sign on that dotted line for a term or agreement you're not prepared to satisfy or do not qualify for. So, but like I said, you'll get faster and faster. So that means that with each subsequent proposal project, you'll find yourself needing to fully read through fewer and fewer of these regulations and clauses. So I suppose when it comes to chat AI tools, I can see the appeal for contractors to use it when quickly trying to uncover proposal requirements, but I don't like that approach being applied exclusively. In my view, if you're serious about winning, again, and performing on a contract, you should be reading the applicable regulations, the policies, the procedures, that will apply to the contract opportunity if awarded. So that's what I'm going to see is best practice there. When going through referenced FAR clauses, the fastest way to search their updated text, especially with alternate clauses, is with acquisition.gov. Acquisition.gov will allow you to navigate to any clause and will provide the full text with any additional clauses referenced, hyperlinked, and ready for you to dive into, which I find really helpful. You'll find that many clauses will cite at least one or two other clauses in their text, and so acquisition.gov makes it easy to bounce back and forth to get the full context there. As you're moving along the solicitation review process and you're reviewing clauses, make sure you note which ones apply to your proposal deliverable specifically. Incorporate those notes into whatever process your team uses to track solicitation requirements. That way you don't overlook anything critical. That's how my clients have been instructed to manage the FAR clauses. They treat them like any other proposal requirement and how they are tracked, monitored, and then satisfied to full completion. And then lastly, I also want to emphasize one more thing. When it comes to RFPs in particular, everyone wants to jump to section L to find proposal requirements, but this is not always, in fact, rarely the exclusive location for proposal requirements. As we've come to acknowledge here today, the FAR clauses often include within them proposal requirements, and FAR clauses are sprinkled throughout many sections within an RFP and other solicitation types. So my last tip or best practice to offer you right now is to be diligent in your solicitation review. FAR clauses and proposal requirements within them can be found in sometimes the most obscure of RFP attachments as well. So don't skip any sections, pages, or supporting documentation within solicitation packages, just so that you don't risk ever missing a FAR reference that is relevant to your proposal, your final proposal offer. Okay, so I want to thank everyone for joining our live today or visiting the replay either here on Facebook or on our YouTube channel. If you're looking to get in contact with me, either to ask me a question or learn more about my proposal training program or the information we discussed here today, feel free to send me a direct message. As you continue to work on your proposal projects, try to shift your perspective when it comes to the FAR. The FAR isn't just legal text. It can be a real roadmap to winning. Contractors who know and understand the FAR, they prepare better, stronger proposals all around. So master the basics, and then let me know if you ever need any help as you dive in a little deeper. But by watching today already, you're that much more comfortable and hopefully knowledgeable about the FAR. And in no time, those reference clauses in the solicitation will lose all their potential powers of intimidation for you. So again, let me know in the comments, if you are looking to connect or perhaps if you've been struggling to understand or interpret any FAR clauses in particular, thus far, and we can make sure that you're on the right track. So with that, we'll go ahead and we'll wrap up. Again, thanks everybody for joining, and have a good one. We'll catch you next week.